at one point or the other. You're trying to make a dashboard and you're trying to understand how you're going to start your first prototype. Sometimes the requirements are there, but you're still trying to figure out what is the best way to like plug everything in, and that's something which you're probably trying to figure out. This video is going to partly focus on that. I've been through certain set of struggles to try and understand how I can get prototypes as fast as possible, and I just wanted to share a few of the insights that I've come across. So has this ever happened to you? Now, you're trying to coordinate with your UX UI designer, and I'm pretty sure if you're a front-end engineer, this is pretty basic, which is that you have a UX UI designer. He's probably going to design something to you in a Figma page, and he'll give you all the sets of assets. Probably a zip folder is what you're looking for, and he gives all those zip folder to you, and it's up to you as a front-end developer to see which one of those assets are to be placed in your web page. And you also need to make sure that the functionality is there. When you're clicking on a button, a certain set of functions need to take place, like making a backend API call or whatnot. Now, during the initial stages, of course, one thing which you're going to bump across is that the alignment is not correct. You're trying to get the alignment in perfect way. All the assets are there, and when I say asset, it's basically a JPG or an IMG file. It could be maybe a video or a GIF. It could be anything. Now, when you're trying to plug it in, you notice that despite having bootstrap and all those proportions neatly framed, you're not able to get it right where you want. And I'm sure a lot of you must have encountered that issue. To give you guys a little bit of a context, right? I've previously worked on a mini project before, like around 1.5 years ago. It was a healthcare project, and I had around 11 GB of data, and it was like all data that was muddled in one giant zip folder. There was information about patients, there was information about medicines, stock of inventory of each of those medicines, which doctor is having which appointment, all of that data. I mean, doctor appointments spanning across different time frames. All of that data was just sitting in this giant folder, and of course, the first thing that goes through your head is like you get this overwhelming feeling. All this data is sitting in front of you, but you don't know what you're exactly looking at. So if you have a business analyst, and if you have perhaps a project manager or a product owner or a scrum master, they probably know what they're looking for. They already went through the back and forth process, like they've talked with the end clients, they've talked with a bunch of people, and then they've gathered all the requirements. Typically it's the business analyst who does it. He gathers all the requirements, and then it finally waterfalls and it comes to you. Now, if you're a amateur who's just like working on a simple project, you don't know what you're working on, but you're just curious to get your hands dirty. You're excited about your first data analytics project. Maybe you're excited about data engineering project. Maybe you want to build an ML model or an AI model, because of the AI hype, and you get all this data, but you're trying to figure out, what am I looking at? What can I possibly do with this, right? If you're at that step, that you should probably sit with the data and try to understand what's happening. When I first got the data, like it was all kinds of unjoined tables that were sitting, all these CSV files and Excel files that were sitting in, and they were unjoined. You don't have a common key. Usually you have a primary key, which is a foreign key in another table, and you're trying to match them both. But in my case, it wasn't matching because I had to like rename the columns. I had to do some column data mapping and all that. Anyway, we had to do a lot of data cleaning end of the day. But yeah, if it's something which you're not aware of, you don't know what your KPIs are, KPI stands for key performance indicators, then it's certainly going to affect you in the long term. So with that in mind, I'm not that this won't be part of the scope of today's video. Um, if you're having trouble trying to figure out what kind of charts you want as part of your what is if you're trying to figure out what your KPIs are, I would suggest strongly to sit with your data and try to understand what exactly it is that you're trying to figure out, because without that you don't even know what you're trying to build in the first place. So maybe just spend some time, create a Jupyter notebook perhaps, and you have maybe a pandas data frames, and you could probably like do some basic operations like doing an aggregation group by statements. And yeah, I would definitely suggest you brush up your skills on SQL. If you know SQL, you could pretty much do the same thing in Excel. I would say be good at Excel before you even go to SQL. A lot of people think that, on a completely unrelated note, a lot of people think that you should be good at SQL to be a good data analyst. But the truth is, and I think a lot of data engineers, data scientists will agree with me on this, is that a lot of them get their work done just by being good at Excel. So if you're good at Excel, if you're good at Power Query, and you know how to do data joins and table joins just by using Power Queries, then you're in safe hands. You don't need to spend extra time trying to figure out how you're going to join different tables with SQL or Pandas data frame. So you have a head start if you know Excel good. So that's one thing I would leave with that discussion. All right, so now you know what you want as part of your dashboard. You are good to go. You know what charts need to be part of it. But you're trying to figure out which particular data is supposed to go in, what particular charts need to be part of my final dashboard, and somehow you got it all figured out. You have your business analyst, you have them all in a room, your business analyst, your product owner, your team lead, all of them, and you say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I see some pretty interesting data insights, and I think this is what the final end client wants. Or maybe the end client themselves, they'll come to you and they'll be like, we had a look at the data and this is what we're kind of looking into. And you come up with, okay, so if these are your KPIs, then I think a bar chart would go good, a scatter plot and a couple of line graphs, maybe throw in an area chart, anything, like whichever works for them, whichever they think is best, and they want whichever KPIs they want to have visual, to have an eagle's eye view over. You can do that using all these charts. So you were able to figure out, you finalize all of it, and you just push it all on your dashboard, right? Now there are two things, right? So one thing is, and a lot of people get confused over this. Even I, during my initial days, got confused about this, which is that I did not know whether I should be going with a Power BI tool or with a web page, an actual front-end web page. Now, if you are, the difference between a Power BI tool or a front-end web page is that with Power BI tool, there is a limited amount of user interaction. All right. Now, it's not like the user does not get to interact with it at all. All right. With Power BI, with the BI tools, what happens is quite often what happens is the data is loaded as a data model. All right. Now, there are probably scheduled refreshes that happen once every hour or maybe once every day, and that's when the data gets loaded from your backend database, and the data is already there. There's no number crunching that is happening, or even if there is a number crunching, it's not extensive. Like, it doesn't require heavy computational power, if that makes sense. um, End of the day, it doesn't require heavy user interaction and number crunching. At least that's what BI tools are used for. Now, when it comes to React dashboard or a front-end web page, things are slightly different. With a React dashboard or a front end web page, what ends up happening is you're making an actual backend API call. All right. When you're making a backend API call, you're either fetching some information which is live, as in which is happening in that particular instant. Now with BI tools, what ends up happening is whatever data has been loaded at that particular instant in the local cache memory will only be presented. But when it comes to the React front end dashboard, you can actually reach out and have access to live data. Um, that's been my personal experience, which is that I always get live data when I'm using React front end dashboard tools. And the other advantage is your dashboard gets updated within the blink of an eye. It's almost like you can have a live dashboard if there is a heavy count of patients that are inflowing. There's a huge influx of uh, patients that are coming into your hospital. You could have an eagle's eye view of which particular department is dealing with it. Maybe the gastroenterologist department is having a huge influx of patients, or maybe there's been an accident, God forbid, and there's been a lot of people who are coming into the ER. And when it comes to like time sensitive data, that makes a lot of difference. Is that makes a huge difference, right? Even if you're talking about another use case like stock data, right? Stock market data is also pretty important. If there is, you can't wait for 1 hour or 2 hours or probably even the end of the day and say, hey, there's been an update like a few hours ago and it didn't reflect till the end of the day. Um, by that time, your stock is probably tanking and you're already in deep shit. So you don't want that to happen. There are some use cases where time sensitivity is of utmost importance, and for such cases I would say React dashboard is your optimal choice, and it will do wonders to you given the right amount of work, attention to detail. So yeah, React dashboard, right? In this particular case, I'm going to focus on React dashboard because when I worked on my healthcare project, it was completely on React. So I'll be focusing on React, which is that you're making a backend API call and then you're getting the data and then you're processing all that information, pasting it onto the dashboard. So you figured out that to get all the bar charts, the scatter plots, everything into your dashboard. Now, this is how the final end result looks like, which is not quite what you were expecting, right? This is a terrible example of a dashboard. Right off the bat, you can see that heading is good, London, which is great. We know what the location is, but so many numbers, so many numbers. Like, I don't think we require, like, if I was an end user and I want to take a look at the key performance indicators, if like this is a terrible example, there are so many numbers cluttered all over the page and you're trying to figure out where am I supposed to look into. So one, I'll try to explain from a human's perspective how a person actually pays attention as soon as he goes to the landing page. We'll come to that shortly, but right off the bat, even a layman can understand that this is a pretty terrible example of a dashboard. There are so many numbers, the colors are way too many. It's like there is grading at some of the places where there's a color gradient. Like for example, if you take 4.3%, 4.9%, 735, 430, that's good. All right, you have color grading. You have you can see the level of increment and all of that. But honestly, I don't think you can even make that. That's just terrible, right? And oops, my bad. And yeah, it's just there are so many numbers, there's so many images. I have no clue where I'm paying attention, and it's all over the place. Definitely, this is not a dashboard that an end user is probably looking for. As a developer, I would definitely endorse this, but as an end user, this is like terrible. As a developer, I might take pride in adding all these things at the same time, but definitely as a end user, not a good example. So let's move on to what would make a good dashboard, right? All right, so let's take this example, right off the bat. When you start looking at this page, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? Your eye immediately gets focused on the heading at the left top corner, which is London, right? So you start from there. um, as a human, it's given that you start looking at data from the left side, and then you slowly start transitioning to the right. All right. Now, any page, any web page that you go across, you start from the left side at the top corner, and then you go in the right side, and then you continue your way down. But here's the catch: there are exceptions to that rule. Now, if I, as an Indian, as a European, or maybe I'm saying, if you are a European, if you are an American, then that's the conventional way of reading things, right? You read from left to right. All right, so your eye contact goes from left to right and then down. All right. Now it's different when it comes to different other regions or other localities, right? For example, Arabics. So Arabic is read from right to left. So even when you're typing something, it goes from right to left. It doesn't go from left to right. And it's different even with Japanese, which is that they read from top to bottom some of the times, and in some cases even left to right. The order is all over the place. So again, each nationality has its own way of reading text. That's how they've evolved throughout the ages, right? So you have to keep that into account, which is that when you're designing a page, it's important to keep in mind what it is that the other person, which particular nationality does he belong to, how is he accustomed to looking at a dashboard. So some nuances that you have to keep in mind before you're designing a web page. Most likely this is something which a UX UI designer takes care of, but it's always better if you are included in the loop. You can always give your criticism or your inputs to the project as it gets evolved throughout the process. Now, obviously, as you can see, when I look at this page, the first thing that my eye drops on is London, which is at the left top corner. Let's assume that this page is being developed for um, the West, like American, someone, a client who's situated in America or in Europe or maybe in India, someone who reads from left to right. All right. Now, right off the bat, I can see that London is coming right at the top corner. So my eye focuses at the top left side, and then slowly starts going from left to right. So I see weather stations, and then weather meta, and then forecast, tube line status. So it goes from left to right. But here's also another catch, right? Um, if I'm seeing numbers and if I'm seeing colorful attributes, for me personally, like I see my eye is focusing a lot on the green tiles, right? So the green tiles like 4.3%, 4.9%, 7354, 430. So my eye immediately catches attention towards these big green icons, and which again, it might differ with different people, but for the most part, your eye is trying to catch attention towards these big tiles which are located right over here, which makes sense, right? But you're trying to redirect attention in a very non-systematic manner. Like, for example, are you sure that you want to redirect your attention towards bike sharing right after London is done, right after your eye focuses on London? Um, that's something up to debate. One other thing which you also need to take into consideration is that you don't want to overload information. It just puts a cognitive tax on the the end user, right? What's a cognitive tax? Cognitive tax is basically the effort that it takes for a user to try to ingest information. So usually any person in general, they need to put some effort to ingest certain information, right? Now if you're making it hard for that particular person to read and understand that information, then you're not doing something correct. That's exactly what's happening. This page is having a lot of numbers all over the place, and that's putting heavy cognitive tax on the end user. Not good as an end user. So I mean, as a developer, it's our responsibility as a UX UI designer, as a front end developer, to make sure that the user is not going through a tough time trying to take in all this information. So this is not good. All right, now let's see what is a good example. All right, I've mentioned one thing, which is we always go from left to right. So whenever we start a page, we go from left to right and then down. So that's one thing. Now second thing is proximity. Proximity is basically when you see a bunch of information that is located in a set of space and they are located nearby to each other, then it is very likely that you will associate that data as one, as opposed to data which is not spaced in that way, if that makes sense. So for example, here in this particular case, you can see that there are a couple of dark blue uh, circles that are here, and you can see that since they are evenly spaced here, your mind automatically makes an assumption that all of these have data corresponding to one particular type of information. And if you go on the right side, you see that this is not evenly spaced and they're also situated far from this particular group. They're not as much as close as they are supposed to be. So your mind automatically makes an assumption that though this information right over here is not the same as this one, if that makes sense. So obviously proximity is that, which is that when a bunch of data or a bunch of icons are situated together, you try to associate it as one particular data item. All right, now another thing is similarity. So what is similarity? Have a bunch of icons and all of them have a similar color. So here, if you can see, you have green here, green here, green here, green here. Now when you see green, you think to yourself, okay, these green tiles are related to one specific set of data. So it's as simple as it gets, right? How can we use similarity? I'll throw out just one simple use case. So let's say, for example, you want to know which of these houses have been um, have fire emergency exits. Probably that's a good place to start. Now, or maybe which of these houses have solar panels installed at the rooftop, right? And this is probably giving me an eagle's eye view of how many houses have in the solar panels attached. And maybe as a marketing person, I would like to know which particular houses I must approach and talk to them about solar panels, right? So just food for thought. If I have a dashboard which gives me that information, saying that oh, this particular house doesn't have a solar panel, this particular house has a solar panel, so probably not a good idea to invest too much money on that, and gives you more information and something to deal with before you go and actually do your work as a marketing person. And common region, right? Now proximity is where you're relying on spacing to tell which particular data items are associated together. Common region is where you're having hard boundaries and you're trying to say, oh, this particular space is all related to one particular data and the other space is related to another data. What is a good use case for this? I would say locational data, for example, geographical data, for example. Let's say you have different counties within a city. For example, if you take Boston, there are perhaps a lot of counties that are there as part of Boston, and you want to know which of these houses are located in one particular common region. You could do that using common regions by marking a boundary around it. But it goes beyond that. Now common regions, you can perhaps also mark all. Let's say, for example, you have a phone app and you have a bunch of switches which are related to your living room, and you have a bunch of switches that are related to your bedroom. All right, now you're confused, so how can I make sure that the end user knows that these are all related to the living room, these switches are associated with the living room, and these switches are associated with the bedroom? Well, it's easy. You can just mark a boundary, and then the user will know, oh, so this is related to the living room, this is related to the bedroom. So, common region, usually good practice is have a boundary um, around the data that you want to stick to, and you could label or mark it as a specific data item. So, common region can be used for that. Now, there are a lot more examples, but I won't go too deep into that because if I keep going, it's going to take a lot of time. But that's it. I have an article which I can link in the description. Please feel free to look at it. It has at least the basic beginning principles of Jessol's principles. Jessol's principles are basically all the basics of how a human psychology works when it comes to visual information. So all of that can be basically visited in the Medium article. Now, when it comes to a placeholder, basically this is where placeholder comes in. Now, by this point, you understand the importance of a layout, how important it is for a layout to be part of the entire picture, right? Now, when it comes to all these different types of localities, different types of widgets, buttons, all of that, you're not sure how you're going to place each and every single thing. Now, this is where placeholder can come in, which is that you can have all these tiles located as part of your web page, and you can place that anywhere in your web page as whichever way you want to. In addition to that, it also helps with resizing of each of those tiles. I would shortly get into it, but you can also do resizing of each of those particular tiles within your application, and also you can make a lot of changes to the particular web page by doing hot patches, which is one of the advantages that you get with React. It has a hot patch, which is that as soon as you make a change, it gets immediately reflected to it, and you can have it as part of your final web page. So I think it would be a good idea if I just provide a demo, which I'll come to shortly. But for now, hot patch is a thing which React has, which is that as soon as you make a change, it will immediately reflect as part of the final web page. So this is one example which I was able to draft. And as you can see, there are a couple of tiles that are here. I think giving a quick run through of the code would be definitely helpful. And let's see. All right. So let's see. All right. Now I've created a basic web page here. I've created a basic web page here, nothing too fancy. A couple of tiles that are situated at different places. This is how the final layout looks like. You have a 356 by 100 tile, three of them situated at the top, and then you have a very huge tile in the middle, which is 1136 by 300. Probably a good place for for movie images where you could like scroll through different images or something like that. And at the end you have a 1136 by 100 tile, which is probably a good place for a footer. I'm just throwing a few terms out, but end of the day, what I'm trying to say is you can have all these different tiles located in your web page, and you can experiment with it. Let's say, for example, I want to change the dimension of my big tile right over here. This particular tile, it looks too big. I don't like it. I want to make sure that it's much more smaller. So I'm going to change this particular one to perhaps I'll make it maybe 536 and then save this. All right. As soon as I save that, let's see, is it reflecting? Yeah, it usually shouldn't take this much time, but I'm sure you get the gist. All right, so as you can see here, you can see that the size of the larger tile has shrunk to 536. The size is no longer 1136, but instead it has reduced by 500 pixels, and we have 536 here now. If we have to keep it back to 1136, it's as simple as just changing it and not having to do too much. Oops. And yeah, you can see that it makes the change immediately. um, for this particular case, to give a brief understanding of what's happening here, we have a bunch of web links which links a specific tile. This is a pretty good um, web page if you want to explore the concept of placeholders. I certainly found this very helpful. Give a quick tour of this website. Yeah, placeholder. So this is a very neatly designed placeholder website. You can plug in whichever image, whichever size of image or whichever size of tile that you want. In my case, I have utilized this src image source to be able to do this. I will link the GitHub link for this in the description. Feel free to check it out. It's not rocket science, but you can take a look at it. It's very easy to plug in and do your own development process on prototyping on top of this. But yeah, you can see how easy it is to make these changes. You can perhaps do your own prototyping. Because the biggest advantage that you get with this is that you can interact with your UX UI designer and get the POC set up as soon as like maybe 10 to 15 minutes. It all depends on how you want the placement and how well you're well versed with the use case, and if you know where which item is supposed to come in, then it's just as simple as just moving things around by making sure your placeholder is navigated through the web page. So as long as you're clear with that, you're good. You're in safe hands. You know what you're dealing with, and that's a good sign. The development will happen way more faster. I struggled a lot during my initial days with this, which is that I could not figure out which is the best way to place a tile. It was There were a lot of overlays that are happening, and you don't with overlays you have something called a Z index, which I'll come in short within the future videos. I will explain more on that in the upcoming videos. But you have to deal with Z index. You don't know which one is overlaying on top of another. You have overflow, which is that sometimes it so happens that the text overflows. If you have a bootstrap layout, then you're in safe hands, but there are a few challenges with bootstrap as well. Again, my idea is not to overwhelm everyone with this information, but you have a certain set of challenges, and this certainly cuts short the process of development. It makes things a lot more easier, and placeholder definitely is a huge time saver when it comes to prototyping. Yeah, not only can you interact with your UX UI designer, you can also interact with your backend. You don't have to interact with your backend designer, because oftentimes what happens, the data is not ready, and you're waiting on the backend developer. You're trying to make sure that his work is done, and then you start your development process. You don't have to go through all that. You can get started with your own development process beforehand. The data loading can happen parallelly, and then finally you can just plug in your API calls wherever you want, and just make your API calls whenever your buttons are ready. As soon as your buttons are ready, you get your link from the backend developer, you load the data. You have a component classes, and those component classes deal with data massaging or data prepping before it comes to the final web page. And end of the day, what I'm trying to get at is you don't have to wait for the backend developer to come to you and give the link, etc. If you have a layout, you're able to get it done. Just I would say just go for it. Put a component, make everything modularized, keep that component somewhere else, and let the component take care of the backend functionality and all of that. So yeah, prototyping becomes a lot more easier, and as I've just mentioned, it's very simple to just adjust everything. You could potentially just keep whatever size that you want for your tiles and just proceed with it. So that's one huge advantage that you get with it. And yeah, I guess that's all I had for this video. I will be taking no questions, obviously, but feel free to drop in any questions that you have in the comment section. If you think this, you have constructive criticism to whatever I've just mentioned, please feel free to add more to the discussion forum. I would more than be happy to go through it. And yeah, front end is, for me, I wasn't a huge fan of it in the beginning. Front end development, it's a huge, like, I was just hoping that AI would take over at some point and like finish the job for me, like finish the whole front end development. But it has its own nuances. Even I don't know how many of you have actually experimented front end web development with AI and ChatGPT, but personally, me, I've had a ton of issues with ChatGPT giving me the final output. Firstly, it doesn't understand the complete context. It doesn't know which API needs to be called. I'm sure if you present the objective in a more concise manner, it would give you better results. I'm not denying that for sure. But that said, I think AI has a long way to go when it comes to front end development. It can give you the layout, but even the layout was something which I had to face a lot of struggle with. It just doesn't know how to make the placement exactly where I want it to be. The functionality doesn't go hand in hand with that. So Placeholders is kind of like a bridge between AI and front end development to some extent, but it doesn't give you the complete solution for sure. You definitely, if the, the case that I just presented is the best case scenario. Your web pages are not going to be as simple as this. You're probably going to have an application panel on the left side. You're probably going to have animation as soon as you scroll your mouse or hover your mouse over a tile, and the layout is probably not going to be as simple as this. You probably have an overlay of tiles one after another, and you have a scrollable option perhaps of each tiles. And yeah, end of the day, it's not going to be as simple as what I frame it to be. It certainly makes things easier, but end of the day, you still have to do your homework and make sure that the layout is coming out right before you start your development process. Placeholder has huge impact on the development process. If you take the wrong step, if you step on the wrong skipping stone, you're done for. You're going underground. So you have to make sure that your layouts are completely disengaged with the backend functionality, as in the placement should not have any association with the functionality of the actual icon. As long as you can separate them, good for you. But if you're not able to, and you'll soon figure out that some cases you have to compromise when it comes to the layout and the functionality, because sometimes if you move the layout a little bit to the side, you think the functionality might actually change. And anyway, I think in future, as I keep doing more exercises, as I keep coming up with more React web pages, I'll be able to demonstrate what I'm actually trying to say. End of the day, if you're able to, my key takeaway is that if you're able to come up with a layout that has no association whatsoever with the functionality, you're able to keep them completely different, the controller class and the layout, then you're in good hands. If you're not able to do that, then you have to figure out what's wrong with your design. So yeah, that's all I had for this video. I hope you found found this helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, and see you guys in the next video.